strongly believe we're at the beginning of a movement and a revolution in what it means to be a woman in 21st century. Being seen and exposed and vulnerable on a screen where other people can judge.
Doing the action is often the most effective in actually overcoming that imposter syndrome. Was that your experience? Hi, and welcome to a new episode of The Light Leaders. Special episode today because I'm with Lacri, who just started her podcast, Nurture Her. And Lacri, you're also my client. So recently I've been starting coaching other conscious leaders on starting, growing, and monetizing their own podcast. And thank you for trusting me with that. You've started your podcast. You are a menstrual cycle coach and lifestyle expert helping women reclaim their vitality by eliminating menstrual symptoms, improving gut health, and achieving the ideal weight, all while enjoying the foods that they love. And I'm excited today because I am on a mission to get all the light leaders to really speak up and take over the internet with positive, empowering content. And it's my passion to help people do that. And likely, even though I'm a man, I have a partner and many women friends. And I do understand the importance for women to reconnect with their cycle in a very masculine society that often ignores it. So that's why I also wanted to help you share that message across, even as a man. And so today in the episode, we'll cover your journey on starting a podcast, how it's been, why you're so passionate about it, as well as your journey on that specific topic, and want to deliver that value also to the people who listen, both on the side of starting a podcast around something you're passionate about, and also on that very specific topic of your story, wanting to be more in tune with your cycle as a woman also. But before we start, Lacri, what are you grateful for today?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the intro. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, to bring my medicine for the world, and co-create this time together and raise the awareness in women about their bodies and cycles, and also in men about their women and the feminine energy, actually, that it's anchored in both genders and also in the earth itself. So yeah, a little bit more about that when we dive into the mission of Nurture Her. What am I grateful for today? I'm grateful for life, for being in this body right now, and having the right tools and awareness to care about my body.
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you, Lacri. And I definitely encourage gratitude and self-love through this podcast, so that's very aligned. Congratulations also on launching your podcast. You've already launched, I think, the first 4 episodes, and as a host, and it's really interesting. What a better way now to continue the podcast expansion than having you as a guest for today. So I thought that'd be a really good experiment also to have you as a guest at the Light Leaders podcast. I'd love to ask you, why did you want to start a podcast around your passion?
Thank you for your question. The podcast is actually an expression of my desire to bring more love and self-care and nourishment into the world. And this is because I've been through my own personal journey of healing from different menstrual imbalances and pains and struggles that mostly affected my mental health, but also my capacity to be resilient in relationships and really step into my leadership and live my purpose. So nurture her is being inspired from actually from a book that's called Belonging, and I think it was written from Tokopa Turner, an amazing woman. It's really great book. And there was one thing that she was talking in there that has had a powerful resonance in my body. And just talking about the depletion of nurturement that our culture is experiencing, like kind of like a culture of a dead mother, in which most of the people are feeling lost. They don't know their purpose. They feel they're seeking a fulfilled life, but they don't know where to start and what to do about. And they're lacking also the drive, the motivation, the energy to step into that part of themselves. And I recognize that especially in women and how difficult it is for them to fit into a culture and society that prioritizes a masculinized way of acting and doing, a patriarchal way, if we can call it like that, as a system, not as a man or woman. So because our Western culture, especially so focused on the doing, we forget to stop and be and replenish and recharge so we can operate at an optimal level energetically, mindfully. So I decided to say yes to this calling and engage in conversation with women around the world that are in the wellness industry and they're passionate about revolutionizing women health and education, because very few women, I mean, no, I don't want to use very few women, because nowadays, if you ask a young girl about her cycle, she will kind of dismiss that even has one. Not to talk about being on pill or other contraceptives that actually stop her real cycle connection with her rhythms. So yeah, I felt that there is so much need to understand how to replenish our bodies as men and women alike, and learn literally to nourish and nurture our being through different practices and ways to disrupt the pattern of being in a constant race of achieving and doing, and learn to pause. And I think this was one of the greatest insight I received from connecting with my own cycle and inner rhythms. I learned to pause, I learned to pace myself, and I learned to listen more deeply to my own needs and learn to express them. So before I was aware of my own menstrual cycle and the idea that each phase of the cycle has a different dynamic and energy to it, or power. I like to use the word archetype. So each phase of the cycle, it's an archetypal energy that surprisingly can be very predictable for women actually to understand what's going on in their cycle. So coming back to the idea of intuition and holding, before I start my practice, the practice of menstrual cycle awareness, which was 7 or 8 years ago, I didn't feel I have a support or a container or holding. So anchoring myself into my cycle and my center, I discovered this. I discovered that there is a holding support around me. My cycle is holding me. There is a structure, there is an organization that is natural, and there is a blueprint. Everyone has cycle as a blueprint for how to live their own life. And I started following the breadcrumbs that my intuition and my inner self was guiding me in my quest of understanding my cycle.
Yeah, thank you. It was a beautiful story that I guess resonates with a lot of, especially women around. And if that's a passion of you, also talking to the viewer now, definitely go and check out "Nurture Her" by Lacri Tripon on YouTube. That's the podcast that she's started, and she's started already interviewing some top leaders in the field. Yeah, go there, check it out, subscribe, and you're also a coach. So get in touch with Rakli if you feel you want the support that Rakli maybe you didn't have when you started on that journey and that then you wanted to provide to others. So check that out if that's of interest. If you're interested in starting a growing and monetizing a podcast as a conscious leader, like Rakli just did, also check out the link in the description. I give more information about potentially having a free session together where we strategize about your podcast and then take it from there. So also another reflection as we were working together, we've been working together now with doing the podcast. It was interesting that you honored your cycles. You told me sometimes, right now is not the most active time of my cycle and taking some more time. It was interesting for me also as a man to see you embody what you're teaching, what you're talking about through your own work and prioritizing your well-being and not being in another rat race, the coaching rat race of doing more, more, more. And even the podcasting can become like, okay, I need to do, and taking some time and making sure that it's at the right time with your cycles and also coming from joy. So it's been interesting to witness also for me as your coach.
Thank you for the reflection. I think it's very important to honor our rhythm, and this is another amazing lesson I learned from my own body, to stop pushing. And the moment I understood that there are certain parts in my cycle, especially in the first 10 days when my estrogen rising and the energy is super extrovert, it's really time where I can engage in this kind of conversations. So I stopped pushing myself, and this created so much safety in my nervous system. And knowing that each cycle I get the chance and the power to choose how to plan my life that supports me rather than exhausts me and pushes me to feel ungrounded and not in my best. So now I really know how to use this as a trick. I have few days when I'm in my best energy, so yeah, why not use them in the right direction, like conversations and podcasting. So thank you for being so patient and receptive in this process. I really appreciated that you gave me that space in integrating and taking my time to direct, to show up in the energy that I feel more myself rather than pushing and um rather than pushing myself.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always an interesting balance as a coach also to understand when it's time to actually be a little bit more like a fierce coach wanting to keep the client accountable, and when it's time to actually understand that there's those cycles and that you wanted to create from joy, and finding that right balance. So I guess as you're a coach yourself, you've probably experimented with that too. I'd love to ask you something with on the podcast, also more specifically, which is how's it been so far?
Oh, exciting. It's been such a transformative journey for me so far, and we are halfway through this co-creation and recording the last 4 episodes. It brought so much for me to work with in terms of embracing and trusting my leadership abilities, my communication skills, and so much curiosity in getting to know the other person in a very different setup, like a podcast, and thinking that I have 1 hour with this person, I have to make it very precious and create so much value out of it. And being present, offering that presence, it's invaluable. Where you can be with someone and fully listen, and that can be felt in the dynamic. And it's such a joy to be able to enable other person to be on a stage and activate their own voices and share what they truly believe in, especially in this world of feminine wellness and education. I strongly believe we're at the beginning of a movement and a revolution in what it means to be a woman in 21st century, because we're well aware that there's so many stimulants from outside that are disrupting our attention, our endocrine system, our lives generally. Literally, we're bombarded by toxicity from media, from foods, from people that are in our environment, and we don't know how to deal with that. Nobody's teaching us how to be selective and how to filter the information, how to filter food, how to read labels, how to literally make choices that are nourishing for us rather than are depleting and destructive our well-being.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've seen you've interviewed really really cool people on that, so I guess you've learned a lot too. Uh, yeah, I'd love to ask you. So you shared a little bit about like listening and being present. What are the main thing you've learned and gained already from doing the podcast?
I'm going to tell you a story, actually, what was the most challenging of all from this. And it's really funny because I thought this is going to be super fun and everything will be in a flow. And I'm at a certain wall of resistance in not in engaging, in believing that I'm worthy enough of having conversation with certain people, especially the people that are, let's say, well established in their field. So I met closely this imposter syndrome, to call it like that, like constantly trying to sabotage me from not reaching out to the people that I truly admire and believe we can have a valuable conversation. So thank you for encouraging me to step into it and do it anyway. And yeah, I think this was one of the biggest things I overcome in our relationship, which is great.
Thank you, Lacri. So the imposter syndrome for sure, which is I think something everyone has when they start a podcast. To be honest, very very common, and it's good that you felt the fear and did it anyway.
Yeah, that fear to reach out to people. And then when the conversation starts, it's all amazing, and I discovered my intuitive ability to bring the best out of my guests into the conversation. And that was so beautiful to witness. And yes, just observing. I think one of the greatest values of this particular process is seeing the growth, from one episode to another is so much growth. And it's so, I mean, you have it in your face, right? You have a video, you have the subscription, you can see everything like in the mirror. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting how I do value for sure going on retreats and doing workshops and doing the personal growth there. But a lot of the personal development can be actually accelerated through the everyday life process, and especially when it comes to quite vulnerable creations like talking online, for example, where as you say, it's very in your face. Every word you say, every uh, attitude that you have, people might comment on it. It's out there in the public, so it definitely can raise a lot of those fears. I mean, I've heard that apparently the fear of public speaking is the top fear, even over the fear of death. I don't know where that comes from, but I've heard that quite a lot of time, and it's something very common for everyone. And it's always interesting when we have these fears. Like, of course, I do believe sometimes in therapy and doing some internal work to look into where the fears come from, rewiring our subconscious and doing work on that. But one of the best therapy is action, right? It's that exposure therapy. So one of my coaches told me about exposure therapy, which is you do the thing, but in a way that's not too overwhelming at the same time. So for example, for people who aren't ready to have a podcast, maybe they can record themselves and send it to a few friends and start like this and doing those steps. And but at the end of the day, doing the action is often the most effective in actually overcoming that imposter syndrome. Was that your
Certain,
experience?
certainly, I think doing person doing personal development through stepping into your purpose and engaging and making your dream true in a business, I think it's the best. It
Mm,
really shapes you and makes you the person you want to become. And there is no way back, because yeah, the fear is real and it's coming and we're always going to be there, but as you said, you have to do it anyway. And I think that two things that really helped me in the process. One is one of my mentors. I always hear her words in my head, like, if you really want to be like a 10x in your business, you have to eat that fear breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You just have it. It's gonna be the most delicious thing you do in your day. And then the second thing was an inspiration actually from one of the conversations you had. I can't remember with whom, but he was sharing about the recording. And I think he said, like, record yourself 10 minutes a day, even if you don't share it. It's just like give yourself that moment of connecting with, I mean, letting your voice be heard and let it out. And that really, really worked very well. Practicing me being in the front of the camera. Although I like to be in the camera, when you're really exposed, it's like, what's actually really going on? And it's very easy to get into a freeze. So it really takes time. And I'm so excited to see how this podcast will evolve in, I don't know, in 1 year, seeing
mm,
myself having the trembling, shaking voice in the first episode, not knowing if I'm saying things right or wrong, or, you know, how people look at me or getting distracted with things around in a year time when it's going to be a completely different image, really embodying and having the experience, the skills, and also the communication, because we know the practices.
Hmm.
Practicing things,
Yes.
they become mastery the more you practice them.
Yeah, for sure. And I've already seen like so much of your progress
Thank
with
you.
the time. I remember at the beginning, for example, you shared a video on Instagram, which is a first step about an announcement for the podcast. And then being a host, now being a guest is also a next level. I do find it interesting when you talked about being in, from the moment you start recording, then things just happen and you're kind of in that flow, and that's actually something I quite like with interviews, is because you're with someone else. It's usually for us humans more easy and intuitive to then have that conversation, and now we're into it. So, okay, we're not too much in our heads. And it's generally easier for most people than speaking alone in front of a camera, where it can be more intimidating. It can be all these step by steps, but I know for me, I was doing only interviews, and only now, 6 years later, I feel more like speaking more directly to the camera and doing solo videos. But yeah, it took me a while too, and I feel it's good to have a keep growing and at the same time do it step by step.
It takes time. It really takes time for our brain and bodies and nervous system to wire to a different reality that we're creating, including this venture into podcasting. And there are different fears that are coming. For me, one of the biggest one was the fear of visibility. That was like terrifying. And
What do you mean?
fear of visibility. What do I mean? Um, being seen and exposed and vulnerable on a screen where other people can judge and have their own opinions about what's going on. And thanks to your help and encouragement in this coaching relationship, I've been able to overcome that, because there was one thing you said at some point, like it doesn't have to be perfect, and stumbling at the beginning, it's the best thing that can happen to you, because that will create the growth and the shift to step into that confidence.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, and it makes me think. Recently I was doing a poll about my podcast coaching, and someone comes and comments something like, I think it was, "You have very little views. You don't have many subscribers. The quality is not great. What are you gonna teach?" Something like this, like quite negative. And so I was like, okay, that's a little bit negative. And then it's like I was feeling into, definitely that triggers the imposter syndrome, because what that person was saying, like, okay, you're not qualified to do this. And there's a part of me that feels like, is that true? And what it boils down to is there's a few things there, but one is, sure, we can always get better, but it's good to start somewhere, and then you can inspire people who haven't done it. Even like for me, I've had that podcast that inspired you. Now you've started that. It's going to inspire people who are scared to just start. Like, so that's one thing. And then another thing is comparison, and especially online. I think a lot of people, when they think podcast, they think Joe Rogan, millions of views, and they think they have to do that. But Joe Rogan started with 0 subscribers too, and it wasn't as good. And so there's a few things there, but it's okay not to have millions of followers. So, for example, in that person, when that person said that, I'm like, yeah, I have 3,500 subscribers on my channel, and some people think, oh, that's terrible because they're comparing with people with millions of people, and some people are almost intimidated, like, oh, to me, you're a celebrity. So it's just really funny to see different people's perspective on the same thing. And the last thing is like, imagine when I have a video that has like even 300 views, right? Like imagine if you were in a room with 300 people. Like most people never spoke for more than 2 minutes in front of 300 people. That's amazing. And sometimes in the online world, we get into comparison, and then we that person, it wasn't a famous person with a big YouTube channel. That was actually someone with a few videos here and there that got like 10 views and stopped, and probably got intimidated by this. So I think that's yeah, an important point to not freeze because we need to have millions of views and be perfect from the beginning.
That's true. There is something truly intimidating about this podcast world, and especially if you're a podcast lover and you have your own favorite podcast. Think about the Diary of a CEO. It's like one of the best ones, and I think I want to be like that. Like millions of viewers, and the quality they're doing, and the quality of guests they're interviewing. And yeah, that's amazing. But in the same time, that's not the whole world. Not the whole world has the capacity to connect and understand and vibrate on that frequency that he's sharing in the world. So he has his own mission, and I believe now more than ever, we as humans have to use the power of our voice, because that's how we create our world and our realities through the power of the voice and the thought. And podcast is such a great way of connecting with others and sharing. And for me, I think the second episode with Sarah has reached 100 views in like 3 days. And the amount of joy I received out of that, is like, I think it's 100 views, not 1 million, it's 100 views. But think about 100 people that have been touched and inspired by that. And I think you get the most joy when you have the courage to share with your friends. Oh, and this was another one, sharing it with my friends. I was a little bit
Mm.
terrified, to be honest, to share it with them. And I took the courage and I said, yes, I'm going to share it. And I've been impressed about the support and responses I received from them in the journey. And one of my friends had really dedicated her time to listen to all of them, you know. And that was so touching for me, and have a conversation with her. And she was really grateful actually to engage with this subject. And she said, wow, you really opened my world to a new reality about my own body and connection with my menstrual cycle. And I want to know more. And we went on a coffee and we had a chat, and I shared some resources with her and encourage her to connect deeply and apply these tools. And it was fantastic. It made me think of one of the greatest gifts we can experience in this life is the impact we make in the life of the other people. All the material possession we can gather around our lifetime has zero value with what we can create for the other, the impact we can create in other. And sometimes we don't know. It has to be just one phrase or one word we're saying, and that shifts the whole reality of the other person. So I encourage everyone who's listening and they have an entrepreneurial business or wants to bring their voice to the world, just get out there and speak. It doesn't have to be any fancy thing. It has to come from your heart, and find the people that supports and encourage you in cultivating that into your life, because we need to speak up. We need to gather together in conversations that are disrupting the pattern of the normal pattern of thinking in our daily culture.
Yeah, yeah. And I see, I can see how for conscious leaders, going to be more and more common to have a podcast and a YouTube channel, like it has to have an Instagram account. And now the barriers are lower because the AI and the tech make things easier, right? I think we're both recording on our phones now with using Riverside, and the AI helps. So it's not like you need the super fancy studio, and more people will do that. And podcasting is just rising. Like it's played a major role in the election in the US. Like I believe Trump and his vice president going on Joe Rogan definitely moved the needle too. So it's been yeah, it's an interesting time for podcasting, and I'd love to and yeah, one more thing is the being niche allows you to differentiate yourself, right? Like Joe Rogan or Dairy of a CEO, they might have millions of people, but right now, if a viewer is a woman who wants to live a conscious life in alignment with her cycle and listen to experts in that field, well, she'll still subscribe to your channel because she'll get that, and I encourage you to do that. And also, you have a unique frequency that even maybe if there's other women that talk about it and have a podcast, maybe some people resonate with you specifically because of your vibe, how you speak, and so don't let that paralyze you for sure. Likely, I'd love to ask you um, if if someone starts listening to a lot of your podcasts for like the next few months, what's going to be the transformation for her?
Hmm. Beautiful question. The vision of Nurture Her is to nurture. The mission is to nurture the world and um, women, and especially the earth. I believe the more women learn to nurture their own bodies, the more the earth will feel nurture herself. Is this feminine energy that we are replenishing. So I think the listeners in this series of podcasts will be able to gather a goodie bag of tools for self-care and insights in how to live a cyclical life that is unique to them. And yeah, it's my greatest joy to support women educate themselves in a world that, you know, we don't receive that in schools, for example. Nobody's teaching us about our bodies and what our bodies can do, you know, especially in terms of sexuality. You know, at school, you've been given like, this is the contraception you can take, you know, like use a condom, or you know, those kind of things. But we don't know what miracle our bodies are, you know, the potency that is hidden inside of a female body. Just think about the amazing things she can do to carry a baby and give life, you know. And nowadays, I mean, this is really sad, but in the States, for example, 1 in 5 women has fertility issues. So this is a huge problem across the world. More and more women around the world are suffering from certain not emotional menstrual imbalances. You know, hormonal imbalances is like a huge cause for disease, and especially mental health is very important because the hormones are messengers of light, and they're governing our thought process, our behaviors, our view of the world. And if there are disruptions in that, it's very easy to feel overwhelmed, anxious, depressed, and depleted, and without vitality to take action in pursuing our passion. So I believe it's fundamental for women to cultivate an understanding of their own female bodies and look at themselves through the lens of hormones. So that's the
Amazing.
vision of nurture her, like really putting on a plate everything a woman needs.
Amazing.
Uh,
So if that's what you want as a woman, again, check the link in the description of the video or type "nurture her" on YouTube, Spotify, and you will find and subscribe there for that transformation.
thank you.
And yeah, actually, as a byproduct of supporting you with your podcast and also selecting the clips, I've stopped touching receipts because I remember I think it was Pauline that was talking about the BPA or endocrine like disruptors on the receipt. So there's a lot of information like this that you can get from those talks, which are really good.
That
And
was indeed
also,
a mind blowing. That was indeed a
mm,
mind blowing idea. You know how we are overlooking the things that are surrounding us. We think are healthy. And that was a very good example. The receipts we're receiving from buying, they're full of plastics and chemicals that disrupt the endocrine system. And not only that, I think she mentioned the carpets in our homes. And I was like, wow. Just a week before, I was buying some carpets. Like, what am I going to do now with them? So yeah, we're very highly sensitive to that.
yeah, yeah. I've
But
also
most
become one of these people in restaurant when the waiter gives me the receipt, like whoa, like they're
no, no,
threatening
thank
me.
you. Can I just take a picture of it? No, I'm doing that. I'm just taking a picture of it. Put it on the counter. I'm gonna take a picture of it. I pay, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lacri. And also, I want to share that it's been a very flowy episode, and you're speaking really well. So congratulations on also now doing these steps, and it's been like yeah, really flowy and part of the growth too. Also for the viewer, if you're a conscious leader interested like Lacri in starting, growing, monetizing the podcast, again, let's have a chat. Go in the link in the description and do the free session with me, and we can take it from there. I'm super excited about having people like Lacri, like many of you guys, become full-on light leaders and share with the world. Podcasting has impacted my life so much from consuming podcasts and now producing them also. So thank you so much, Lacri, for joining today. And I know it was the next step also in the expansion in that new identity of a podcast host now and guest also now. So I'd love to ask you, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the viewer today?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for this opportunity. I start liking this identity of a podcaster and stepping in this authority and owning my teachings and voice and truly sharing what I believe in. So thank you for this opportunity. Hope we're gonna get a chance to expand onto this as we move forward. And for your listeners, I would like to encourage them to prioritize self-care, learn to nourish themselves, being with food, music, good people around, good podcasts, information that really feeds the soul. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lacri. What a beautiful message to finish. And you know what I like with podcasting also is sometimes you can create that kind of inception process, which is within the recording. We talk about the experience. And so usually with my guests, I ask them how it was after and have a little chat with them. But for the sake of this episode, I feel like we could do within the recording. I'd love to ask you, how was this for you? How was recording this episode with me?
Thank you so much. As a first experience, it's been great. Um, a bit nervous at the beginning. I relaxed more as I moved along into the conversation. I feel grateful for the opportunity to speak about my vision with Nurture Her. And what else? A new beginning. More to come.
More to come.
It's been the seed. It's been planting the seed of a new way of connecting and interacting and sharing myself with the world and being in service to raising consciousness in the consciousness of the world.
Amazing. Thank you, Lacri.
Thank you.
Much love to you and much love to everyone who watched today.